It's 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in October, and somewhere in the Uintah Basin of northeastern Utah, a rancher named Dale Whitfield is standing in his kitchen with a phone in his hand, and he cannot make his fingers dial. Outside, his cattle are screaming, not lowing, not the low, irritated groan of cows disturbed by a coyote at the fence line, screaming, a sound Dale has never heard an animal make in 41 years of ranching, a sound that claws up out of an animal's chest when something has gone fundamentally wrong with the world it lives in. He's already looked out the window once. He wishes he hadn't, because out in the north paddock, under a sky so clear you can count every star over the basin, 4 of his heifers are hanging in the air, not jumping, not startled into a leap, hanging 4 feet off the ground, legs locked and rigid, bodies perfectly still, except for a faint, slow rotation, like they're pinned to the inside of a glass jar that someone is turning in their hands. Dale doesn't remember picking up the phone. He remembers the dial tone. He remembers his own thumb, which won't stop shaking, missing the 9 twice. Somewhere behind the house, past the old equipment shed, something makes a sound like a screen door swinging on a rusted hinge, except Dale doesn't have a screen door out there. He tore it down 2 summers ago. The line connects. 911, what's your emergency? And Dale Whitfield, a man who once set his own broken arm rather than pay for an ambulance, a man who has never in his life called for help, opens his mouth and says the only thing he can think to say. I need you to send someone. I need you to send someone right now. There's something in my paddock and it's not... He stops. The dispatcher waits. Sir, are you still there? There's a long, long pause on the line. 3 full seconds of open air, of static, of nothing. Then Dale's voice comes back, quieter now, flatter, the voice of a man trying very hard to sound like he isn't afraid, and failing. It's walking on 2 legs. This is the story of what happened next, reconstructed minute by minute from a call that a lot of people wish had never been made. A call that ends 17 minutes and 4 seconds after it starts in complete silence. Stick around, because by the end of this, you're going to understand why the deputies who responded that night still won't talk about it. To understand what happened to Dale Whitfield, you need to understand where he lived. The Uintah Basin sits in the northeastern corner of Utah, a wide, flat, high desert bowl ringed by mountains, cut through by the Green River, and home to some of the emptiest, quietest land in the continental United States. It's oil country, it's cattle country, it's the kind of place where your nearest neighbor might be 4 miles away, and your cell signal drops the second you turn off the highway. It's also, according to generations of Ute oral tradition and more than half a century of rancher testimony, one of the strangest patches of ground in America. Long before white settlers arrived, the Ute people who lived in and around the basin spoke of the area with a particular kind of caution. Some accounts describe it as a corridor, a place where things pass through that don't belong on this side. The term skinwalker itself comes from Navajo tradition, referring to a malevolent witch capable of transforming into animal form. And while the folklore doesn't map perfectly onto Ute belief, the name stuck to a 512-acre ranch that sits at the heart of the basin, and it never let go.
By the time the Gorman family bought the property in 1994, they'd heard the stories. They bought it anyway. What happened to them over the following 2 years? Cattle mutilated with surgical precision and no blood left at the scene, strange lights that moved against the laws of physics, a 300-pound wolf that shrugged off rifle rounds at point-blank range and walked away, became so well documented, so consistently reported by multiple family members independently, that in 1996, the ranch was purchased outright by an aerospace executive who funded a private scientific investigation. That investigation ran for years. It never produced a clean answer. It also never stopped. The ranch itself has changed hands twice more since then. What hasn't changed is the basin around it, the dozens of smaller ranches and homesteads scattered across the same stretch of land, families who never asked to be part of any of this, who just wanted to raise cattle on cheap Utah acreage, and instead found themselves living inside the edges of a story that refuses to end. Dale Whitfield's property sat 6 miles northeast of the ranch's main gate. He'd bought the land in 1988, long before the Gormans, long before the History Channel crews, long before anyone outside the basin had heard the word Skinwalker attached to this particular stretch of dirt. He knew the stories, the way everyone in the basin knew the stories, the way you know a scar on the back of your own hand, something you stopped really looking at years ago because it's just always been there. He'd had his own moments over the decades. A night in 1994 when every dog on his property refused to leave the porch for 6 straight hours, hackles up, growling at nothing. A stretch in 2003 when his cattle kept turning up with perfectly circular patches of hide missing, no blood, no torn flesh, just clean, cauterized absence, like something had lifted the skin away with a laser. He'd stopped reporting these things to anyone but his wife, Carol, years before she passed. What was the point? Everyone in the basin had a story. You learned to live next to the thing you couldn't explain, the same way you learned to live with the winters, the isolation, the long silences between one truck passing on the county road and the next. But he had never, not once in 36 years, seen anything like what happened on the night of October 14th. The timeline that follows has been pieced together from the original 911 dispatch audio, later obtained under a limited records request, and from statements given by the 2 responding deputies before those statements were sealed as part of a broader county policy restricting the release of records related to incidents in the immediate vicinity of the ranch. Some details remain disputed. What follows is the reconstruction that best fits the available evidence. At 11:31 p.m., Dale Whitfield was in his living room watching television when his 3 dogs, 2 heelers and an aging border collie named Scout, began barking at the front door in a register he'd later describe as not their normal bark, higher, like something was hurting them just by being close. He got up to check. Standard procedure for coyotes sniffing around the property line, something that happened 2 or 3 times a month and never amounted to anything beyond a lost chicken. He opened the front door. The dogs didn't run out. They backed up. Border collies do not back away from open doors. It is quite literally against their nature. They are bred to move toward things, to herd, to engage. Scout, a dog Dale had owned for 9 years and never once seen hesitate at a gate, a fence, or a bull twice her size, pressed herself flat against the baseboard of the hallway and would not come within 6 feet of the threshold. Dale stepped out onto the porch alone. The night was clear, later confirmed by National Weather Service records for the region, a cloudless sky with visibility exceeding 10 miles. The temperature was in the low 40s, there was no wind, and from the porch, Dale could see his north paddock where he kept 11 head of cattle in a fenced 4-acre lot roughly 200 yards from the house. The cattle were not where they should be. Cattle at night, left undisturbed, cluster. They bunch together in the center of a pasture or along a fence line, a herd instinct that goes back to the earliest domestication of the species, safety in numbers, safety in stillness. Dale's 11 head should have been a dark, unremarkable mass somewhere near the water trough. Instead, they were spread across the paddock in a rough, evenly spaced ring, each animal facing outward from a shared center point, each one standing completely unnaturally still. Dale would later tell the responding deputies that his first thought was that someone had drugged his herd, that someone, a rival rancher, a poacher, kids messing around, had gotten into his paddock and tranquilized 11 full-grown cattle, which would have required an amount of sedative and a level of access that made no practical sense, but which was, in that moment, the only explanation his mind was willing to consider. He went back inside to grab his rifle and a flashlight. It took him, by his own estimate, less than 90 seconds. When he came back out onto the porch, 4 of his cattle were off the ground.
The 911 dispatch center serving the basin logs every call with a timestamp accurate to the second. Dale Whitfield's call connected at 11:47:12 p.m. and was answered by a dispatcher identified in county records only by her badge number, 214. Her name was withheld in the later sealed filing, a detail that, on its own, means very little, except that it's consistent with how the county has handled every other record connected to this call. What follows is a reconstruction of the call's key exchanges based on the surviving audio and the written incident log filed by Deputy R. Cordova, one of the 2 officers who responded. 11:47:12 p.m. The call connects. Dale identifies himself, gives his address, and states that he has something in the paddock that he needs law enforcement to see. His voice, in the earliest seconds of the recording, is controlled. The voice of a man who has decided, consciously, to sound calmer than he feels, because that's what 41 years of frontier self-reliance trains a person to do. 11:47:41 p.m. The dispatcher asks him to clarify the nature of the emergency. Is this a trespasser, an animal attack, a medical issue? Dale's response, according to the transcript, is, "I don't know what it is. I need you to just send somebody. My cattle are up off the ground." 11:48:03 p.m. The dispatcher, reasonably, asks him to repeat that. Dale repeats it. He adds a detail that does not appear in his earlier statement, that the cattle are turning, slowly, like they're on a string. This is the point in the call where the dispatcher's tone shifts subtly on the recording. Not disbelief exactly, but the particular carefulness of someone trained to de-escalate a caller they suspect might be in the middle of a mental health crisis. She asks him if he's taken any medication that night. He says no. She asks if he's been drinking. He says no, and for the first time, there's an edge in his voice. Not anger, but something closer to desperation, the frustration of a man watching something impossible happen in real time, while the person on the other end of the phone is still trying to find a rational box to put it in. 11:48:50 p.m. Dale says, "I'm looking right at it. I've got 4 head of cattle 4 feet off the ground, and I need you to believe me, because I'm not going to be able to explain this twice." 11:49:15 p.m. The dispatcher confirms a patrol unit has been dispatched and gives Dale an estimated arrival time of 18 to 22 minutes, standard for the sheer distances involved in basin response times. She asks him to stay on the line and stay inside the house. Dale does not stay inside the house. This is the section of the call that has generated the most speculation, the most argument, and, among the small number of people who've heard the unredacted audio, the most unease. At 11:51:02 p.m., Dale's voice on the recording changes. The controlled calm is gone. What replaces it is not screaming, not panic in the way people picture panic. It's quieter than that, and somehow worse. It's the voice of a man narrating something he does not want to be narrating, because some deep animal part of him understands that if he stops talking, he'll have to stop looking, and if he stops looking, he won't know where it is anymore. "There's something coming around the side of the barn," he says. The dispatcher asks him to describe it. What follows is verbatim from the surviving transcript. It's walking upright, like a person, tall, maybe 7 feet. It's hard to get a good look. It's dark out here, but it's walking on 2 legs, coming around past the equipment shed, and it's a pause, 3 seconds of dead air. It just dropped down.
It's on 4 legs now. It's moving faster. The dispatcher, per the log, asked him twice during this exchange to confirm what he meant. Animal on 4 legs? A person crouching? A dog? Dale did not directly answer either time. His attention, based on the audio, was clearly no longer on the phone call at all. He can be heard breathing hard. At one point, footsteps, his own, moving across the porch boards. At 11:52:30 p.m., he says something that the transcript records with a bracketed note, inaudible, possible word wrong, followed by a much clearer statement. It's back up on 2. It's standing by the fence, and it's just standing there looking at the house. There is a long silence here, nearly 40 seconds. The dispatcher can be heard asking repeatedly if he's still there. He answers each time, yeah, I'm here. But the responses grow shorter, flatter, more distant. The voice of a man whose attention has narrowed down to a single point of focus somewhere out past his porch rail. At 11:53:20 p.m., the dogs inside the house begin barking again, audible on the recording, a chaotic, frantic sound, completely unlike the earlier barking at the front door. Dale can be heard telling them twice to get back, his voice sharp with something that isn't quite fear and isn't quite anger, the particular tone of a person trying to protect something. Then, at 11:53:52 p.m., according to the log, Dale says the cattle in the paddock have stopped moving entirely, no longer rotating, no longer suspended, simply gone still and silent, all 11 of them, like someone hit pause. And the shape by the fence, he says, has started walking towards the house.
This is the part of the story that, once you sit with it, is genuinely hard to shake. Not the shape in the paddock, not the floating cattle, but this. For the entire back half of this call, Dale Whitfield is completely, catastrophically alone, and everyone on the other end of the line knows it, and no one can do a single thing about it. Basin response times aren't a failure of the system, they're geography. When your nearest deputy is patrolling a county larger than the state of Rhode Island, with a population density measured in single digits per square mile, 18 to 22 minutes is fast. It's the honest math of policing empty land. But math doesn't help a 63-year-old man standing on his own porch with a rifle he hasn't fired at anything larger than a coyote in a decade, watching something walk toward his house that his own eyes refuse to categorize. At 11:56:04 p.m., Dale's voice returns to the line. He'd gone quiet for almost 90 seconds, and the dispatcher had been trying to reach him the entire time. When he speaks again, something in his tone has fundamentally changed. He's no longer describing what he's seeing in real time. He sounds like a man reciting something he's already decided he's not going to be believed about, getting it on record before it's too late to matter. It's at the fence, the one around my yard, not the paddock. It's just standing there with its hand on the top rail. The dispatcher asks, hand or paw or hoof? Dale's answer, per the transcript, takes 11 seconds to arrive. Hand. At 11:57:40 p.m., Dale tells the dispatcher he's going to step back inside and lock the door. This is recorded as the first moment of clear, decisive action he's taken since the call began, and it's notable because everything about Dale Whitfield's history in the basin suggests he is not a man who locks doors. Ranchers in that country don't, as a rule. There's nothing out there to lock a door against. The sound of the door, a heavy wooden interior door based on Dale's later description to Deputy Cordova, closing and bolting is audible on the recording at 11:57:52 p.m. For the next 90 seconds, the call is mostly silence. Dale's breathing. The dogs, quieter now, whining low in the hallway. Once, distantly, a sound that the transcript describes only as unidentified scraping, exterior, duration approximate 4 seconds. A sound that, according to Deputy Cordova's later written statement, matched the mark the deputies found on the porch railing when they arrived. 4 parallel gouges in the painted wood, roughly 2 inches apart, cut too clean and too deep to have come from a bear, a mountain lion, or any tool Dale owned. At 11:59:10 p.m., Dale speaks again, quietly, almost to himself, in a line that the dispatcher on the recording asks him to repeat and that he does not repeat. The transcript records it as inaudible, possible, it knows I'm on the phone. At 12:02:15 a.m., according to both the dispatch log and Deputy Cordova's incident report, the patrol vehicle carrying Cordova and his partner, Deputy T. Alvarez, crossed onto the county road leading to the Whitfield property, roughly 4 minutes out. Dale was still on the line. The dispatcher had kept him talking with small, steadying questions. Was the door still locked? Could he see anything through the windows? Were the dogs calm? The standard toolkit for keeping a frightened caller anchored to the present moment until help arrives. At 12:03:41 p.m., Dale answers one of these questions. His voice is described in the dispatcher's later statement as very calm, calmer than he'd sounded the whole call, like whatever had scared him had passed, or like he'd made peace with something. He says the shape isn't at the fence anymore. He says he can't see it anywhere. The dispatcher asks if it left. Dale's answer, his last coherent sentence on the recording, is a single line that has become, among the handful of people who've heard the full audio, the detail that sticks the longest. I don't think it left. I think it's closer. At 12:04:02 p.m., there is a sound on the recording that the county's own transcript describes with unusual, almost reluctant specificity. A single sharp inhale, followed by silence. Dale Whitfield does not speak again. The dispatcher can be heard over the following 90 seconds repeating his name with increasing urgency. Dale, can you hear me? Dale, I need you to respond. A standard protocol for a caller who has gone unresponsive, escalating the priority of the responding unit, confirming the address a second and third time. The line stays open. It does not disconnect. There is no dial tone, no busy signal, none of the technical markers that would suggest a dropped call or hardware failure. There is simply nothing on the other end. For 4 minutes and 18 seconds, an eternity in dispatch terms, the call remains connected, silent, live, while deputies Cordova and Alvarez close the last stretch of county road toward the Whitfield property with lights on and no siren per standard rural protocol for a call with an unclear threat level. At 12:08:20 a.m., the recording captures the sound of the patrol vehicle's radio, faint and distant through the still open phone line, as the deputies check in with dispatch on arrival. The 911 call disconnects at 12:08:47 p.m., not from Dale's end and not from a technical failure, but because the dispatcher, upon confirming the deputies were on scene, formally closed the call per protocol. Total duration, 17 minutes and 4 seconds, an early, unofficial figure that circulated before the county's formal incident log corrected it to 17 minutes and 35 seconds. Either way, the number that matters is the same. For the final 4 minutes of that call, nobody, not the dispatcher, not the 2 deputies racing down a dark county road, not anyone at all, had any idea whether Dale Whitfield was alive.
Deputy Cordova's written statement, the portion of it that survived redaction before the broader file was sealed, describes arriving at the Whitfield property to find the front porch light on, the front door locked from the inside exactly as Dale had left it, and no sign of forced entry anywhere on the structure. The dogs were inside, uninjured, and by Cordova's account, acting normal within about 10 minutes of us arriving. A detail he found strange enough to note explicitly, given how distressed Scout and the 2 healers had reportedly been throughout the call.
Dale Whitfield was found in his living room, seated in an armchair facing the front window, the cordless phone still in his hand. The call log showing the connection had in fact stayed open the entire time dispatch believed it had. He was alive. He was breathing, conscious, and, according to Cordova's statement, unable or unwilling to answer questions about the preceding 20 minutes in any detail beyond what he'd already told dispatch. Physically, he showed no signs of injury, no blood, no bruising, nothing to suggest an attack of any kind had taken place inside or outside the house. Paramedics who arrived shortly after the deputies checked his vitals and found nothing abnormal beyond an elevated heart rate consistent with acute stress. The paddock told a different story. All 11 head of cattle were accounted for, alive, and, per Cordova's report, clustered tightly at the far southeast corner of the enclosure, as far from the house and barn as the fence line allowed, showing no visible injuries, but exhibiting what I'd describe as unusually skittish behavior for cattle at that hour, startling at flashlight beams and refusing to be approached on foot. Standard practice would have been for the deputies to simply note this and move on. Spooked cattle are not in themselves evidence of anything a sheriff's department can act on. What made it into the report instead were the marks. The 4 parallel gouges on the porch railing, already mentioned, photographed, measured, and never satisfactorily explained in the surviving portion of the file. A second, separate set of tracks found in the soft dirt along the fence line separating the yard from the paddock, a stride pattern that alternated across roughly 30 feet between what Cordova's report describes as a 2-point gait consistent with bipedal movement and a 4-point gait consistent with a large quadruped, with no clear transition marks between the two, no dragging, no stumbling, no sign of an animal dropping to all fours the way a person might get down on their hands and knees. The tracks simply changed mid-stride from 2 points of contact to 4 and back again, over and over, moving in a straight line directly toward the house. Alvarez's portion of the report, shorter and by several accounts within the department more clearly troubled, noted a temperature reading taken near the fence line roughly 40 minutes after arrival, 11 degrees colder than the ambient air recorded less than 60 feet away at the patrol vehicle, with no wind, no water source, and no environmental explanation offered in the file for the discrepancy. Neither deputy reported seeing anything themselves. Both reports, independently, use some version of the same phrase to describe the property as they found it, that, in Cordova's words, it felt like something had just left. Part 9. After. Dale Whitfield gave one more statement in the days following the incident, a brief, formal follow-up interview conducted at his home, the transcript of which forms the last complete document in the file before the county's decision to seal the broader record. In it, he adds only one detail he hadn't already given during the call itself, that in the final seconds before he stopped speaking, the shape had come close enough to the window that he could see it clearly for the first time all night, and that what he saw was not, in his words, an animal wearing something wrong, and not a person doing something it shouldn't be able to do, but something that seemed to him to be neither or both, shifting between the two the way a heat mirage shifts a shape on a hot road, never fully committing to either form long enough for the eye to hold on to it. He was asked directly whether he believed what he saw was connected to the ranch 6 miles to the southwest, the property that by then had already built a regional reputation stretching back years. His answer, according to the transcript, was brief. "I don't know what's connected to what out here anymore. I just know I've lived on this land longer than most people have lived anywhere, and I'd never seen anything like that, and I hope to God I never do again." The county's decision to seal the broader incident file, including the full deputy reports, the complete photographic evidence from the scene, and
portions of the dispatch audio beyond the initial call was made roughly 6 weeks later and has never been publicly explained beyond a brief administrative note citing ongoing review and ordinary privacy protections for a caller who did not wish to be further identified in connection with the incident. Records requests filed by researchers and journalists in the years since have been partially fulfilled, partially denied, and in several cases met with responses stating simply that the requested materials could not be located. Dale Whitfield sold his property in the spring of the following year and moved out of the basin. He has not spoken publicly about the events of that October night since his final statement to the sheriff's department. Neighbors who knew him say only that he never fully explained why he left, beyond telling one longtime friend that he'd lived next to it long enough, and that some things you're supposed to leave before they decide to ask you to leave. The ranch 6 miles to the southwest is still there. It's changed hands again since then. The reports out of the basin, the lights, the cattle, the things that move at the edge of a flashlight beam and don't move like anything should, have never stopped. And somewhere in a county records office in northeastern Utah, in a file most people will never see, there's a dispatch log with a 17-minute call in it, and a silence in the middle of that call that nobody who was there that night has ever fully explained. If you're ever driving through the Uintah Basin after dark, and there's really only one road that takes you through it, you'll notice how quiet it gets, how the radio starts to lose signal somewhere around mile marker 40, how the darkness out there doesn't feel like the darkness anywhere else because there's nothing to interrupt it for 50 miles in any direction. No city glow on the horizon, no other cars, nothing but the sound of your own engine and the shape of the mountains against a sky that has too many stars in it. And if your headlights ever catch something standing at the edge of a fence line out there, something tall and still and watching, keep driving. Don't stop to get a better look. Dale Whitfield did, and it took him 17 minutes to stop talking.